Welcome to the Music for the Soul podcast, where we talk honestly about difficult things. This is a place where music, hope, and healing come together. I'm Becky Nordquist.
And I'm Steve Seiler. Today we have with us Gina Boe. Gina is a mentor, a speaker, a singer, a podcaster, an author, and a Dove Award-winning songwriter. Have I left out anything, Gina?
Oh, goodness. I'm about to be a grandma. Does that count?
Oh, that really counts.
Way counts.
It's like the most important thing right now, I think. But yes, I do all those things.
That is
How
awesome.
Exciting. Oh, grandkids are the best.
I hear that. It's my first one. So,
oh my goodness. I'm telling you, like if I would have known how great grandkids were, I would have had them first. Well, I am so excited, Gina, to have you today. I just have been enjoying some of your music, and I'm going to come clean. I was actually late signing on for our time together because I got so engrossed in your newest project, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I am a champion for those people that are way interested in learning about songwriting and the journey that people take. And so I'm going to start off with the question that I love to ask writers, which is, how did you first get into songwriting?
goodness, I don't honestly get asked that question very much. And I kind of have to think about it a little bit. But my family would tell you that I wrote my first song when I was 5 years old. And it was this silly little ditty. We were playing a board game and I started writing this song about the board game. And so they would tell you that that was my first adventure into songwriting. But really, I would say I was one of those teenagers who wrote a bunch of really bad, sappy love songs throughout high school.
Yes.
And that's how I coped with life. And then really when I was in college, I was a piano performance major for a while. And anybody who's studied in that kind of arena at that level knows that, strangely, it's not always the most creative environment. It's a very disciplined environment. But I needed a creative outlet, and I wrote a lot of songs when I was in college. And that's kind of when I feel like I thought to myself, okay, maybe this is what I want to do.
Wow. Yeah, I think those bad, sappy love songs might be a rite of passage for some of us.
They are. I look back on those very fondly. It's like, I think I got a lot of bad stuff out of me in order to write some better songs, hopefully.
Got to get all the garbage out.
Hey,
Yes.
Anyone who knows me knows that the song I detest the most is Babe by Styx, which I think is the classic example of what we're talking about here. And It was a multi-million seller. So you know what? You might have a gem in there that you don't even realize.
Who knew?
It'd be crazy if I go back and revisit those songs and one of them ends up being my like rocket to success.
It could happen. Anything is possible for sure. And it's so funny you mentioned the piano performance piece in college, because a lot of people think, oh, you're a music major, and they automatically associate that with creativity. But it's true. So much of that type of discipline and learning is very structured and confining, actually.
Yes.
So I love how you use the songwriting as your creative outlet, because it's sometimes hard for the student that is focused on a performance major to break out of that mode.
When you said piano, the first thing I thought of was regimented, because I remember the piano lessons, and I would do anything to not practice, include writing songs.
Yeah, it was honestly a really difficult time, because I went into music in college because I loved music and I loved performing. And the sad thing is, after a couple of years of playing for 5-6 hours a day, and to the point where I got tendonitis in my wrists and had to quit for a while. And I mean, it's brutal. And I've had 2 kids go into the music school system in college. And so I've watched it from both angles. And unfortunately, depending on what you want to do with your life, for me, it just really started to suck the joy out of my life. And I found myself not loving music. And I just had to take it a different direction, or I knew that I was going to be bitter and frustrated and angry.
Gina, I did not know that we had this in common, but same exact thing happened to me. I went to college and I was on a music track. And after the first year, I thought, this is killing me. I got to get out of here. Yeah. And I went and walked in off the street and got a job at A&M Records to work in the actual music business.
Mhm.
and sort of went to college through that
Yeah.
job of being around
Yeah.
professionals. But the college piece was, like I said, it was regimented and boring and uninspiring. And I just felt like I was a fish out of water there. So
Well, I've
interesting to hear you say that.
Yeah, and I've watched my third child, my son. He went to college, the same music school I went to, as a vocal performance major. And after a year and a half, he was headed into his last semester as a sophomore, and he was like, I don't want to be here anymore. And this is what I want to do." And I'm like, "Okay, go, go." And he
Mm.
moved to Nashville when he was 20, and now he's pursuing life as a writer and artist. And I'm like, I'm his, obviously his biggest cheerleader, partly because I'm his mom, but also partly because I've walked that road, and I know that I don't want him to feel the things that I felt. And he's learned so much, and he's loving it. So it's all good.
Well, your podcast is called The Hopeful Creative, and you have a book and an album called Hope Deserves an Anthem. So, how did you arrive at the merging of the themes of hope and creativity?
I think when I was in a season, probably 4 or 5 years ago, where I found myself writing a lot about hope. And it wasn't even so much an intentional thing. I just found this kind of common thread. When I
Mm.
would look back over the songs I'd written over the past 6 or 12 months or whatever, there just was kind of this consistent theme. And I guess I write about that in a lot of different ways because I write about my faith. But it seemed like it was a more direct kind of line to the concept of hope. And I'd written one song in particular called Hope Deserves an Anthem. And I just felt like that there's a reason why there's this common thread. And I didn't necessarily know what that was. But in some strange way, God revealed that to me, even in my own life, when I was diagnosed with breast cancer on New Year's Eve of 2020. And all of a sudden, those songs that I had written for other people to sing and other people to record became very personal to me.
Mm.
And it was like I needed the reminder. And so I would go back, and even in looking at songs in my own catalog and thinking, I have, like any songwriter, professional songwriter, I don't know, maybe people have more success than I do, but I've got hundreds of songs that will never see the light of day.
We
And
all do. We all do, by
yeah,
the
yeah.
way.
And so I would go back and listen to some of those songs and go, maybe the whole purpose was for me to go back and hear these with a fresh set of eyes and ears, and going, okay, maybe this was just for me, or maybe this is for me to put out into the world in kind of an unconventional way to reach people that aren't going to necessarily turn on the radio and listen to a song, or they're going to search for something a little different, or maybe even a little deeper. So I just, over the course of a couple of years, just kind of pursued this project of putting songs together that I felt like people needed to hear when they were in a really, really bad place.
Mm, mm. I love
Love that.
that. One of the lyrics in that really caught me was, "It might as well be me who holds the pen to tell someone that they can breathe again." And that hit me so hard, because as creatives, sometimes we can find that really difficult when you're in the middle of a storm to work creatively. And, I'm just wondering, do you have any suggestions that you would give someone about using creativity to process their struggles?
Well, first of all, I want to give credit where credit is due. I co-wrote that song with Joel Lindsay, and it's really
Mm,
appropriate that you bring up that line, because I don't remember how that whole song was written, but I believe that Joel is the one who kind of threw out that line. And if you know Joel,
mm,
he's the 3-time cancer survivor.
mhm,
And so to have had the privilege of writing that song with
mm,
him, knowing that we both understand what it means to access creativity in a time when you're just desperate.
mhm,
And I think the very first concept in scripture is about creativity.
Yes.
And so I think there's a connection that we can have with the Lord when we are being creative.
mhm,
And I think when you are facing a difficult time, to go back to that beginning thing that God did, I think there's something really beautiful about that. Because I'll be honest, when I was, at the lowest points of my cancer journey, there were a lot of days where I would just sit on my back deck and I would just go, God, I don't have anything today. I have nothing. And so, but I could write. Some days I could sing. And I felt like that was all I had to offer. And so it just felt like this really almost like a back to basics kind of thing between me and the Lord. Like I was created by a creator to be creative. I think in the core of every person. I don't think just because I'm a songwriter I have the upper hand on that. Everybody has that. And that's one of the things that I'm really, really passionate about in life, is helping people identify what is your creative thing. And man, when you find a way to do that, and you do that as a way to connect to the Lord, but then also as a way to connect with people, that is such an incredible, beautiful, powerful thing.
Absolutely. And I don't know if you've ever said that before in exactly that way, but we were created by a creator to be creative. That is a quote that will work.
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
That quote will do work, because I can't agree more with what you're saying. I've always found it interesting that people would think they aren't creative when we're made in the image of God. How could you not think that you have creativity in you? That just doesn't make any sense.
I think what's happened over the years, and I think, social media has certainly fed into this, is the world has told us that if we are not unleashing creative work at a certain level or to a certain audience, that it doesn't have as much value. And I will fight that till the day I die. Yes. Because if and I know you believe this too, if I have one song that reaches one person, it has served its purpose.
Right.
So that's what I want people to see, is that whatever your creative thing is, if you do it one time to reach one person, it has value and purpose.
Amen. My wife and I lived in Hollywood for many years and both worked in the entertainment industry. And what you just said is true. There is a superiority sometimes that you feel and hear from people who are doing it in a certain arena. But I've often thought, 13 million people are seeing this TV show maybe, but there's nothing here that anybody needs to see, really. And then I'll hear somebody play a song in a songwriting workshop, and I'll think everybody needs to hear this, right? So you can't judge the content by the destination it reaches or the medium it's seen or heard through. So that's such great stuff. Well, obviously, you are our kindred spirit, Gina, because that's what Music for the Soul does, is try to share stuff with people who are struggling with the most difficult places. And so naturally, it would make sense that we'd asked you to write something for us, and you did that on the Mercy Great Enough album. You wrote the opening track. It's called Hidden Things, and I want to play a little bit of that just now.
Behind the eyes, a world unseen of sleepless nights and silent screams, self-inflicted suffering. Slavery to hidden things, buried in the darkest part, shame and secrets rule my heart, begging for the light to bring rescue from these hidden things.
So can you tell us anything about the writing process for that song?
Well, you had, put out the request for songs for that project, and I write with a couple of people frequently, Elisa Qualsett and Sue Smith, and we were writing one day and wanted to write towards that project. I believe Lisa Qualsett is the one who kind of brought that idea to the table. And it's interesting. As a songwriter, our job is to give voice to people's emotions and their experiences, whether or not we've had that experience. And that is in my mind, such a privilege to be able to do that for somebody. And so, we were writing out of a situation where we didn't necessarily have the experience that we were writing about, but we all knew what it was like to have secrets and to deal with the shame. And that's the universal component of that, is that we understand what it's like to just want to hide away and not face the things that we have experienced, or not share that with other people. And so I think it was just such a powerful thing for us to dig that deep into something that is really hard to write about. And the other thing about that song is, it doesn't get wrapped up with a nice little bow at the end. And that's one thing that I appreciate about being able to write songs for things that just have a really specific purpose and don't have to provide all the answers.
Right. You've written a lot for CCM, obviously, and that formula is a CCM formula. Got to have all figured out within 3.5 minutes. And I think for Music for the Soul, that's one of the freeing things about writing for this ministry is we let the individual song be the moment that the person is in, and it doesn't have to fix things. Sometimes people just need to feel heard and seen and understood.
Yeah.
And so a song like Hidden Things has value at that point. And I know I've shared with you that there's another ministry called Support After Abortion that has actually adopted that song as part of an online journal. Yeah. And I thought that was really interesting. So obviously the plowing of the depths that you guys did resonated, because all the people within that organization, for them, it is their story. And that's the first song they selected for the journal.
I think it's okay. We need to let people know that it's okay to kind of live in the sadness and to grieve the things that need to be grieved. And I remember the first time that I really felt that the weight of that was probably after my oldest son graduated high school and went off to college. And I remember thinking, I don't want to skip over this emotion. I want to live in this emotion for a while and feel everything I need to feel and grieve everything I need to grieve, because I feel like until we do that, we can't get to a place of healing that God wants for us. And so I think the more that we tell people it's okay, it is okay to grieve that stuff. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be mad, and yeah, so I appreciated the fact, I appreciated the freedom that song gave us to not have to wrap it up with a big bow.
Yeah, so often we're quick to look for the cure, and then we miss some incredible gifts that God gives us through just having a holy lament. And when we are willing to dive into those spaces, I mean, a lot of people have been told that certain emotions, well, they're not holy. Well, no, we have a holy God. And if you read the Word of God, you see that He expresses every range of emotion. And Jesus did too here on earth. When He was here, I mean, He was a man of sorrows. It wasn't that He was happy all the time. And so it's just that perfect picture for us to say, hey, it's okay. And I want you to walk through the valley. He doesn't tell us to jump over the valley and get to the other side. Hurry up. It's you're in the valley and it's dark, and that's where I'm going to meet you. That's where you're going to reach out in the dark in faith and know that I am your God and I am there with you to walk through the valley. And if we try to skip over those emotions, like you said, we miss such a beautiful part of the character of God. Yeah. We're missing out on the lessons, but we're missing out on parts of Him that we wouldn't get any other way.
I'm not a patient person by nature at all.
Neither.
Not even. I don't have a glimpse of that in my DNA. Yeah. But you know what? If there's anything that'll make you learn a few things about patience, it's cancer. And so there were 2 3-month periods where I could not do anything. 2 summers and 2 3-month periods where I couldn't do anything but literally just sit on my back deck. And so that's what I did. And I just remember thinking, thank you, God, kind of sarcastically, for teaching me this lesson of patience that I obviously needed to learn. I needed to learn how to just sit and be still for weeks on end. And man, I don't like those seasons.
Nope.
But boy, what I learned during those times, is priceless to me. And to be able to look at it now and go, I'd walk that road again for that stuff.
Yeah, the gift of who He is becomes greater than the suffering that you endured to find it.
Yeah.
He is a treasure. He is the treasure. So I'm going to change gears here a little bit. I can't remember if I mentioned this just before we started or if I mentioned it after we started, but I was looking through some of your catalog and so I'm like, wait a minute, I know that kid's musical. Oh, I know that one. Oh my goodness. And that song. And so, but you also have a children's book called What If They Fly? Raising Creative Kids to Believe They Can Soar. And so I'm wondering what inspired you to write that?
Well, I have 4 kids and they are all uniquely creative. My oldest son is actually my boss right now because he is a choir teacher and I am one of his accompanist.
So great.
So I was here first. I just want to say that. And then he got hired. He got hired the next year. But so I've learned a few things there as well. But when my youngest was in high school, about to graduate high school, I had learned a few things about launching my kids, and sending them out into the world. And because my kids are creative in ways, I guess, that have been visible to people, they're songwriters in there. One's a filmmaker and one, that kind of stuff. And so I would get asked a lot, like, how do you nurture that in your kids? And how did they get to be that way? And I work with MOPS a lot. Mothers are preschoolers, that organization. And so I would get that question a lot. And I just felt like I wanted to share a little bit about kind of our family's journey and my journey as a mom in launching kids and not just launching them, but, what are the things that we tried to do and what are the big mistakes that we made? And so going back and sharing both of those things that, hey, these are the things that I feel like maybe we did well. And these are the things that, boy, if you could avoid making this mistake, avoid that. And I work with high school and middle school students every day too. And seeing these kids who have, again, they're all creative, but being able to help identify that and pull that out of them can be a real challenge. And so, I just wanted to put something out there for parents and grandparents and teachers to be able to say, how do we nurture that in our kids? How do we nurture that in our youth in a way that makes them feel like there's purpose in it?
Yes, I so have a deep appreciation for that and for this book because my parents did so wonderful at trying, but they didn't know. I don't think they really knew how to cultivate and encourage. And, then there's the fear, like, what's the likelihood you're going to make it? So I appreciate that. And I have to tell you, as I listened to What If You Fly, I cried because I felt like little Becky was in there listening to this voice. And I'm like, man, I think I just wanted to say if you are struggling with maybe your kid and your parents aren't that supportive or maybe they just don't know what they don't know. I mean, because that's totally a thing, right? As parents, we don't know everything and we mess up and we don't know how to do certain things. But if you can just go in and tune into that song and just let your heart hear it, you'll find encouragement through that song. I really enjoyed that. And I'm excited to really dive into this book too, because I have kids now and I definitely want to encourage them in all the ways that I wish I would have been. So thank you for being a voice, for offering advice to people who don't know the best ways of what to do or what not to do. That's so helpful for parents, especially I run into a lot of people that they have really creative children and they're not creative. So they don't know what to do with it.
Right. And there's a chapter in there about that. Like when you don't understand your creative kid, what do you do? How do you approach that? Or when they're interested in things that you have no interest in.
Right.
And that is a challenge to be able to come alongside your kid and do what they love and, and to find a group for them to be, or find other mentors for them. And sometimes that takes a little bit of swallowing our pride as parents and going, okay, I don't, because I've prayed for other people to come into my kids' lives that they would listen to. Because, the reality is somebody else is going to say the exact same thing I said, and they're not going to listen to me. They're going to listen to them. So there's the whole lot of that component too. And I think a lot of parenting is swallowing your pride.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. Well, and I mean, we're all creatives here, so we're in a friendly bunch, but it's not always easy to understand personality of the extreme creative. A lot of kids are really emotional. She's so emotional. I just don't know what to do with all that feeling and all that stuff. I'm like, okay, well, first, artists typically are very emotional. We have to feel everything in life deeply so we can interpret it for someone who doesn't. And that's a God designed place in us, in order to have that ability to create things that give a voice to another person's ache. Right. So I love this. It's so helpful.
Oh, good. Thank you.
What you just said about creative's feelings reminds me of something that my oldest granddaughter said to her mom recently. Mommy, my feelings are too big for my body. Isn't that
Out of the
beautiful?
mouths of babes.
Yeah. The thing about kids, and my wife was mentioning a study that she had read that like 90% of kindergartners think they can sing, and like only 5% of high schoolers think they can sing. So it's like when we're kids, everything, a dandelion in a crack in the concrete is a miracle, right? And when we're older, nothing is a miracle, right?
Wow.
And kids come into the world, I think, from God as a creator. They come into the world with that wonderment. I can sing, I can dance, I can paint. They'll try anything. And we get older and jaded, and the world pushes down on us, and we get to the point where we don't feel like we can do anything like that. I think that's what gives your particular approach such value, Gina, and makes it so important.
Well, it's true that something happens between the ages of 5 and even 15 that if we don't pay attention, we're going to squelch something in our kids that will be really, really difficult to get back, like harder to get back. And so to be able to recognize when they're little, you got to encourage that in a way that, because everything else in their life is going to try to kill it. And I think it grieves me to think about the creative work that will never be unleashed because a kid was told that what they were doing didn't matter, or it wasn't important, or it wasn't going to make money, or it wasn't, and I think that's a whole other issue as far as like developing a right perspective on success and wealth and
value.
All these things. Yeah. And it's like, man, we gotta fight that because the world is telling us the complete opposite. And it's a shift in mindset. It's a shift in perspective. It is a developing a worldview that allows you to be creative. And that is, it's hard. It's a lot of work.
I think it's really important too to say to the listener that is like, oh, I'm too old. I had a creative bent when I was a kid and I missed my shot. My parents weren't encouraging, or I was told that I wouldn't make it, which is actually part of my songwriting story. So, but I think I just want to say it's never too late. And God, He can restore and redeem things that you thought were 6 feet under. And He can open doorways if you just give Him your yes to whatever He has in store. Just start writing or start singing or take some piano lessons, whatever it was that you dreamed of as a kid. Like you said at the beginning, Gina, just that how we're created really, we're created in the image of a creative God. And I loved how you pointed out that's the very first thing that we know about God in the Bible is that He's creative. I just love that point. So I've got to ask, how are you doing physically now? You mentioned going through cancer. I'm just wondering how you're doing now.
This is what I tell people. I am so, so grateful that I feel as good as I do. I'm considered still in treatment because I'm still on a chemo pill and still taking some other meds. I've never had the experience of being able to ring a bell or anything like that to say, cancer free or whatever. And I've directly asked my doctors, do I get to say that? And they're like, no, not really. And so it's kind of an interesting situation, but I'm so grateful I feel as good as I do. I can do most of what I want to do. It's just a new normal. I don't feel like I did before diagnosis, which is so funny because I had no symptoms, no history, no nothing. And I felt great until they started treating me, which is often the case. And so that's can be really frustrating at times. I'm very frustrated by my limitations. But I'm also I try really hard to balance that just with an attitude of gratitude, to be so grateful for what I am able to do. And so I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that I'm going to be able to continue to do the things that I love and be able to continue to put out work into the world that I care about. And I'm going to live like I'm going to never have to deal with it again. And, that's all you can do.
Well, we're glad you're feeling better, obviously, and we continue to pray for your total healing and recovery.
Thank you.
So that you can put great stuff out into the world. And speaking of that, would you tell people how they can get in touch with you and learn about the books we've talked about, the songs we've talked about?
Sure. Yes, you can go to ginaboe.com. So it's super easy to remember, just ginaboe.com. And that's my website. And then you can find access to all the other things from there, the books, the podcast. I do a lot of like mentoring and keep helping people complete their creative projects. I think one of the things I've learned about myself, and I've learned about a lot of creative people, is that we're great starters. We aren't always great finishers. And so one of the things that I love to do is come alongside people who have a creative work in process, but they just can't get across the finish line. Mm. And so right now I'm working with a couple of authors, just helping them get to the finish line and get their books published. And I do that with a lot of writers and things like that. So you'll find a lot of stuff on the website about that, but also just a blog where I just share life and other resources. So that's the best place to get a hold of me. And you can kind of find everything else from there.
Okay, well, let me make sure and tell people that Boe is spelled B-O-E, because I can just see people typing in Gina Boe, B-O-W, and going, why can't I find the website?
I know. I always say it's like Toe or Joe or so Ginaboe. So
well, you've completely wonderfully spoken the message that we always like to share with people here at Music for the Soul, is that you are not alone. So when you said artists often have a hard time completing things, I literally just said to someone the other day, I go, I'm really great with ideas and creativity and starting things. It's going through to the finish line that I kind of tank out sometimes. So I just was like, oh, I'm not alone. So,
well, I have lived that. I mean, I look at my list of, like, I go back over things on my computer and I'm like, oh gosh, that was a great idea. Nothing ever happened with it. So I know what it's like to be that person. So helping other people get to a point where they can feel that sense of accomplishment. And somebody said one time, art isn't finished until it's shared. And so it's important to me to help get people to the point where they can share their work.
That's so great. I just love that. I'm going to have to go check that out because I might be calling you up.
Okay.
Oh, goodness. Well, we are so glad that you could be with us today. Thank you for being a light and shining bright and offering hope for those of us who needed to know that we could possibly fly. Thank you so much.
Well, really thank you. I'm so grateful for the work that you do and so honored that I've gotten to be a very small part of that. And I think you're doing kingdom work, and it's really, really important. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much. If you enjoyed the discussion today, please share it with a friend and give us a positive review on iTunes.
And please visit our website, musicforthesoul.org, where you can stream or download every song in our catalog, including hidden things, read our lyrics, our healing music guide, our blog posts, and much more. Thank you so much for listening. God bless.
Behind the eyes, a world unseen of sleepless nights and silent screams, self-inflicted suffering of slavery to hidden things, buried in the darkest part, shame and secrets rule my heart, begging for the light to hidden things. So much I fear, but try to hide the guilt and grief I hold inside. I wrestle with the memories to keep them with the hidden things. All these choices I have made break me in the deepest place. Can what's been ruined ever be redeemed? Is there hope for hidden things? Old and chained with a smile, hold the pain back, hold the pain back. Old and chained with a smile, if only for a little while. All these choices I have made break me in the deepest place. Can what's been ruined ever be redeemed? Is there hope for hidden things?